A principal sneered, swearing he'd quit if the shy black girl dared touch the piano. Moments later, she walked on stage, every eye locked on her. One thunderous performance later, the crowd was on its feet, and the man who mocked her was left red-faced and silent as her secret life as a rising music star was revealed. The school auditorium buzzed with nervous chatter as students prepared for the annual talent showcase. Backstage, the smell of fresh paint from the new stage props mixed with the faint scent of popcorn from the vending machine outside. Parents filed into the rows of wooden seats, their conversations blending into a soft roar. Bright stage lights poured down on the polished grand piano that sat in the center, gleaming like a silent challenge waiting to be accepted. The curtains swayed gently, as if holding their breath for the next performance. Principal Harris, a tall man with a booming voice and a habit of carrying himself like he owned every corner of the school, stood near the front with a clipboard. His sharp suit and perfectly knotted tie made him look more like a judge than a school administrator. He scanned the list of performers with a hint of boredom, his pen tapping against the paper. His eyes finally paused at the final name written in neat, careful handwriting. Amara Williams, piano solo. He raised an eyebrow, then let out a loud chuckle that cut through the hum of conversation. Amara? The quiet black girl from the back of the class? If she plays the piano, I quit. The words rolled out like a challenge, bouncing off the auditorium walls. A few nearby teachers and students froze, unsure whether to laugh or look away. Some let out short, awkward giggles, more out of discomfort than agreement. Amara, standing a few feet behind him, heard every word as clearly as if he had whispered it directly into her ear. She felt the sting, but her face remained calm. Her deep brown eyes didn't waver, and her shoulders stayed straight, refusing to show even a flicker of hurt. She had heard comments like this before, people assuming they knew her story, deciding what she could or couldn't do before she even tried. She adjusted the cuffs of her simple white blouse, a quiet movement that steadied her racing heartbeat. The chatter around her seemed to fade until all she could hear was the distant hum of the stage lights. Without a single glance at the principal, she stepped toward the side entrance of the stage. Her shoes made soft, deliberate clicks against the wooden floor, each step a silent answer to his mockery. Students parted slightly to make room, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Amara's posture didn't change. She walked as if those cruel words were nothing more than dust floating in the air, as if every step toward the grand piano was a path she had already chosen long before anyone doubted her. What no one at Crestwood High knew was that Amara had been living a quiet double life, one carefully built in the shadows. By day, she appeared to be the model student, polite, soft-spoken, and reliably at the top of every class. Teachers praised her for her focus and maturity, and classmates often asked her for help with assignments. She would stay late in the library, bent over her notebooks until the janitor flicked the lights to signal closing time. To most people, Amara was simply a bright but ordinary girl whose world revolved around textbooks and test scores. But the moment the sun slipped below the horizon, her life transformed. As evening settled over the city, she became something else entirely, a musician whose fingers moved across ivory keys as if they had been born there. The girl who spoke little in class could make a piano sing, laugh, and cry all in the space of a single song. This hidden side of Amara had deep roots. Her grandmother, Lillian Dupree, had once been a celebrated pianist in New Orleans, playing smoky jazz clubs and grand theaters alike. Before illness slowed her down, Grandma would sit Amara on her lap and guide her small hand across the keys. Music is your voice when the world refuses to listen, she used to whisper, her own fingers flowing like water. Those evenings became the heartbeat of Amara's childhood, and even after her grandmother passed away, the memory of those lessons never left her. Every night, after finishing her homework and making sure her mother was settled in with a cup of tea, Amara would quietly slip out of the house. She crossed town to a weathered brick building, the old community center that smelled faintly of wood polish and history. Inside, In a dimly lit room where posters from long-forgotten concerts still clung to the walls, an aging upright piano waited like a loyal friend. Its keys were chipped, and its frame carried the scars of decades. But to Amara, it was perfect. She practiced until her hands ached and her back stiffened, mastering classical pieces one evening and exploring wild, improvisational jazz the next. Her music became her diary, each chord carrying her joys, her fears, and the quiet strength she rarely showed at school. At Crestwood High, however, she guarded this gift like a secret treasure. People there expected little from her beyond good grades, and sometimes it felt easier to let them underestimate her than to invite their curiosity or doubt. But when the announcement for the annual talent showcase came over the loudspeakers, something inside her shifted. This was her moment, not to boast, but to finally share the music that had always been her truest voice. Back in the auditorium, the crowd buzzed as performers came and went, a pop singer who belted out chart-topping hits, a juggling act that drew polite claps, and a rock band whose deafening guitars left everyone's ears ringing. The atmosphere was lively, but routine, until the MC's voice sliced through the noise with a surprising announcement. Next up, Amara Williams. A ripple of confusion swept through the audience. Students glanced at each other, brows raised. Some even whispered, trying to remember if they had ever heard her speak more than a few words in class. Near the front row, Principal Harris folded his arms, wearing a smug smile as if he already knew what to expect, and it wasn't greatness. From the side curtain, Amara stepped onto the stage. She wore a simple white blouse and a black skirt, her outfit almost understated compared to the glittering costumes of the earlier acts. There was no dramatic entrance, no extra flair to capture attention. Yet the quiet confidence in her stride carried a power of its own. She approached the grand piano, a sleek instrument polished to a mirror-like shine. Adjusting the bench with careful precision, she sat down and let her fingers hover above the keys. The overhead lights reflected off the piano's surface, framing her like a silhouette in gold. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then, with her eyes gently closed, Amara pressed the first keys. The opening notes floated into the air like a soft breeze drifting through an open window. It was a delicate melody, clear, pure, and unexpectedly moving. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The restless shuffling of feet stilled. Every whisper dissolved into silence. The melody deepened. Rich, vibrant chords began to swell, filling every corner of the auditorium. Her fingers blurred with speed and precision, leaping effortlessly between classical arpeggios and bold jazz improvisations. Each note carried both discipline and wild freedom, a sound that felt at once ancient and startlingly new. Phones emerged from pockets and backpacks as students and parents scrambled to record what they were hearing. Teachers leaned forward, some with mouths slightly open, stunned by the complexity and emotion flowing from the stage. Principal Harris's grin faltered. His arms slowly uncrossed as the music grew stronger, brighter, like a rising storm. The piano's resonance seemed to pulse with Amara's heartbeat, echoing through the wooden floors and high ceiling until the entire room felt alive. Every run of notes told a story of late nights and secret practice sessions, of quiet strength and hidden brilliance. The audience, entranced, could only watch as Amara transformed the stage into her world, each measure daring anyone to ever doubt her again. When the final chord thundered and faded, the silence that followed was so deep it felt like the whole world had paused. For a long heartbeat, no one dared breathe. The grand piano's last vibration trembled into nothing, and the air seemed to shimmer with the echo of her music. Then, like a spark setting off fireworks, the room erupted. Cheers, whistles, and an instant standing ovation. The sound hit the walls of the auditorium and bounced back, louder and louder. Students who had barely spoken to Amara before were now clapping until their hands stung. Parents and teachers whistled and shouted her name, their excitement rising in waves. Some students jumped up on their seats for a better view, phones raised high to capture every second. Amara stood gracefully, her face calm despite the explosion of applause. She gave a small, respectful bow, a quiet smile touching her lips. For her, this was not a moment for grand gestures. The music had already spoken everything she wanted to say. She turned to leave the stage, ready to slip back into the wings as quietly as she had entered. But the MC, a young drama teacher holding the microphone with wide, astonished eyes, stepped forward quickly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying a new energy, "did you know that Amara Williams has already performed at the New Orleans Jazz Festival? She's been featured on national radio." Gasps rippled across the crowd. A few students exchanged shocked looks. One girl whispered, "No way," while another clutched her friend's arm. The revelation seemed almost unreal. The truth was that Amara's late-night practices hadn't remained a secret forever. Months earlier, while she was performing at the old community center during an open mic night, a local music scout had happened to walk in. Captivated by her playing, he invited her to record a small demo. That demo led to more opportunities, and soon she had quietly signed with a respected recording label under a stage name, A. Williams. Her first album, a daring blend of jazz and classical styles, had already begun to go viral online, earning praise from critics and thousands of new fans who had no idea she was still a high school student. From the front row, Principal Harris's face turned a deep shade of red. His jaw tightened as the reality settled in. The man who had mocked her only hours earlier was now clapping stiffly, his movements awkward and forced. He tried to mask his discomfort behind a polite smile, but the change in his expression told the real story. The authority figure who once doubted her was now just another member of the audience, humbled, silenced, and undeniably impressed. All around him, students who had heard his cruel words earlier were cheering even louder, their eyes flicking toward him with a mix of triumph and amusement. The sound of their applause seemed to echo the lesson Amara's music had delivered. Talent needs no permission, and brilliance cannot be contained by someone else's expectations. After the show, when most of the crowd had drifted toward the exits, the echo of applause still lingered in the high-ceilinged auditorium. Amara was carefully wiping the piano keys with a cloth the stage crew had handed her when she noticed Principal Harris walking slowly down the aisle. The confident stride he usually carried had softened into something almost hesitant. He stopped a few feet away, cleared his throat, and spoke in a voice far quieter than the one that had mocked her earlier. "Amara, I didn't know. I'm sorry for what I said." His words were measured, heavy with the weight of regret. Amara straightened, meeting his gaze without flinching. "You didn't need to know," she replied calmly, each syllable deliberate. "You just needed to believe every student has potential." For a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. Her words were simple, but they cut deeper than any speech could. A few students who lingered near the stage nodded in agreement, their eyes bright with admiration. Teachers who had gathered their belongings paused mid-step, exchanging thoughtful glances as if realizing the truth behind her statement. Principal Harris looked down, his shoulders sinking. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I let my assumptions speak louder than my responsibility as an educator. Thank you for proving me wrong." Amara offered only a small nod. She didn't need to say more. Her music had already spoken for her. The next morning, Crestwood High felt different. Word of Amara's performance had spread through the halls like wildfire. Students who had never paid her much attention whispered her name with newfound respect. Teachers replayed videos of her performance on their phones, shaking their heads in amazement. On the main bulletin board outside the office, a fresh announcement appeared in bold letters. Crestwood High to launch a music excellence program, inspired by Amara Williams. Beneath it, a note invited students of all skill levels to audition for new music scholarships and lessons funded by local donors who had seen the viral clips overnight. As for the principal's bold declaration, "If she plays piano, I quit," he did not resign. Instead, he spent the following weeks personally meeting with students, encouraging talents he might once have overlooked. The boastful man who had laughed at her was humbled into a better educator. And Amara? She kept playing. Within months, invitations arrived from larger venues and festivals across the country. Bigger stages, brighter lights, and larger crowds awaited her. Yet, no matter how far she traveled or how many accolades she collected, she carried with her the memory of that single night at Crestwood High, when one small stage and one fearless performance turned her quiet passion into legend. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.